When people enter relationships, they often do so with an invisible checklist in their minds. They imagine their partner should always understand them without explanation, should never raise their voice, should never forget an anniversary, should always stay attractive, or should handle stress exactly the way they expect. And when those expectations are inevitably violated, frustration builds. We tell ourselves, if they really loved me, they wouldn't act this way. That thought alone has destroyed more relationships than infidelity ever could. Because behind it lies a lie, the lie that perfection exists, but perfection is an illusion. Real people are messy. They forget things, they get tired, they say things in anger, then how the Salus, in anger. They don't always listen as carefully as we want them to, and so do we. If you've ever been in a long-term relationship, you know this. The first 6 months might feel magical. You overlook flaws because attraction blinds you. But then reality sets in. You see habits you don't like. You notice weaknesses. You discover that your partner is not an ideal character from a movie script, but a flawed human being with a past, with insecurities, with scars you never saw at the beginning. The immature response at this point is to run. You convince yourself that you deserve better, or that true love shouldn't be this hard. And so you move on, chasing another perfect illusion, only to repeat the same cycle again. But the mature response is different. The mature response is recognizing that this is where real love begins. Because now you are no longer in love with the fantasy, you're face to face with the actual person. Let me ground this in a simple example. Imagine you're married and your partner has a habit of being late. Every dinner, every gathering, you're left waiting. It irritates you. The immature response is to nag endlessly, to blow up with anger, or even to secretly decide that they don't respect you. But the mature approach is to step back and ask, is this lateness really a lack of love? Or is it just a flaw in time management that I need to accept while still holding them accountable? That shift in perspective can save years of resentment, because if you demand perfection, lateness becomes betrayal. But if you accept imperfection, lateness becomes something you work around together. Now, acceptance doesn't mean you tolerate everything. That's another misunderstanding. It doesn't mean ignoring disrespect, abuse, or dishonesty. It means learning to distinguish between flaws that are part of being human and flaws that are destructive. Nobody should excuse, but expecting your partner never to be moody, never to make mistakes, never to misunderstand you, that's not love, that's fantasy. In fact, acceptance goes both ways. Think of how often you yourself fail your partner. Maybe you withdraw when stressed. Maybe you don't express appreciation enough. Maybe you carry unresolved anger from your past. If you expect grace for your own flaws, shouldn't you extend it to the person beside you? That reciprocity is the heartbeat of a mature relationship. The hard truth is this: your partner will disappoint you, and you will disappoint them, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in painful ways. But that doesn't mean the relationship is broken. It means it's human. What defines the strength of the bond is not the absence of disappointment, but the way you respond to it. Do you weaponize their flaws, or do you work with them? Do you let imperfection drive you apart, or do you use it as an invitation to grow closer? Here's the reality. If you wait for perfection, you'll spend your whole life waiting. If you chase an ideal partner, you'll never truly know anyone. But if you accept that imperfection is part of the deal, then suddenly every mistake becomes an opportunity for compassion. Every argument becomes a chance to practice patience. Every flaw becomes a reminder that you're dealing with a real person, not a fantasy. A mature relationship, then, is not about two flawless people colliding in harmony. It's about two flawed people who choose again and again to stay, to work, to forgive, to grow. That choice is not glamorous, but it is profound. We often grow up with the illusion that love or relationships in general should be effortless, that if someone is truly meant for us, everything will flow naturally, without friction, without movies, novels, even social media feeds feed this fantasy of seamless compatibility, where the right partner simply completes you, and there's no need for struggle, no need for hard work. But reality is far more sobering and, in truth, far more meaningful. A mature relationship is not about escaping difficulty. It is about how two people face it together. It's about communication and responsibility, not fantasy and perfection. Think about it. Communication is not just about talking, but about the willingness to enter into uncomfortable conversations that expose vulnerabilities, even flaws. It's the courage to say, I feel hurt, or I don't understand you right now, without masking it with pride or silence. At the same time, responsibility means owning your share in the dynamic rather than always pointing the finger outward. Immature love waits for the other person to change. Mature love asks, what can I do differently to make this better? Let me give you a simple example. Imagine a couple who constantly argues about finances. One partner might say, you always spend too much, while the other responds, you never let me enjoy life. If they stay locked in that cycle of accusation, the relationship corrodes. But if they step back and communicate honestly, I worry about security because I don't want us to face a crisis later, or I need some freedom to enjoy what I earn because otherwise I feel suffocated. Suddenly the problem transforms. The argument shifts from blame to, and when each person takes responsibility, not just demanding change, but offering it, solutions emerge. They might agree on a budget or decide on discretionary funds. The problem doesn't vanish, but it becomes manageable because they chose maturity over fantasy. And here's where many people go wrong. They confuse harmony with the absence of conflict. But harmony is not silence, and it's not avoidance. Harmony emerges from navigating through conflict with honesty and responsibility. You cannot reach genuine closeness if you are unwilling to risk discomfort. In fact, the strongest bonds are often forged in the moments when both partners dared to sit in the fire of a difficult truth rather than retreat into polite distance or self-deceptive peace. I recall once speaking with someone who had been married for more than 40 years. When asked what the secret to such longevity was, they didn't say love or passion or chemistry. They said, we never stopped talking, even when we were angry, even when it was uncomfortable. We just kept talking until we found our way back to each other. That is the essence of maturity, not the absence of storms, but the resilience to weather them together. Now why is responsibility so central here? Because relationships are reciprocal systems. If you continually cast yourself as the victim, you disempower yourself, you give away your ability to influence the situation. But if you own your share, even if it's small, you reclaim agency. You step into the role of an active participant rather than a passive complainer. Responsibility is not about accepting blame for everything, but about recognizing that you have the power to shape the quality of the relationship by your choices, your words, your attitude. Too often we imagine that maturity means suppressing our emotions or becoming stoic. But maturity is not about becoming less emotional. It's about being more skillful with your emotions. It's about recognizing the impulse to lash out, to withdraw, or to blame, and instead choosing a response rooted in clarity and care. That requires discipline, it requires the willingness to put the health of the relationship above the gratification of winning an argument. What we must understand comes turn against you. It's there, in those uncomfortable spaces, that love ceases to be a mere feeling and becomes a deliberate choice. And that choice, again and again, to stay, to work, to forgive, to rebuild, that is the essence of resilience. The idea of resilience doesn't mean simply enduring silently as though one partner must swallow every grievance. It means facing reality honestly and courageously. It means being able to tell the truth, even when it risks conflict, and then working through the consequences together rather than running away. It means looking at your partner and recognizing that they will fail you at times, just as you will fail them. But instead of seeing failure as a signal that the relationship is broken, maturity views it as an opportunity for growth, for repair, for strengthening what already exists. A mature relationship then is not about avoiding storms, but about learning to navigate them together. There's a quiet kind of courage required for this, because it's far easier to quit when things get hard, to walk away and convince yourself that somewhere out there exists a person who won't disappoint you, who will perfectly align with your every expectation. But that fantasy always shatters eventually. Every human being comes with flaws, and every bond will encounter friction. The question isn't whether storms will come, but whether you and your partner have built the resilience to withstand them without crumbling. This doesn't mean tolerating toxicity or enabling destructive behavior. Resilience is not the same as martyrdom. It's not about sacrificing your dignity or tolerating harm. Rather, it's about discerning the difference between normal human imperfection and genuine destruction. A partner who forgets, who gets frustrated, who makes mistakes, that's human. A partner who manipulates, demeans, or abuses, that's toxic. Maturity requires the wisdom to know when to stay and fight for growth, and when to walk away because the soil is no longer fertile. But within a healthy bond, when two people are genuinely committed, it is precisely through difficulty that intimacy deepens. Forgiveness, for instance, is not simply about overlooking faults, but about choosing to see the humanity in the other person despite those faults. Patience, too, is not passive waiting, but active endurance. The willingness to allow time and effort to work their way toward healing, and communication, honest and raw, becomes the rope that ties you together through the storm, preventing you from drifting too far apart. If you think about it philosophically, resilience in relationships mirrors the resilience required for life itself. No life is without suffering, and no growth comes without challenge. To demand a perfect partner is to deny reality itself, to cling to a fantasy that can never withstand time. But to embrace imperfection as part of the journey, that is to walk into life's truth with eyes wide open. In doing so, you free yourself from the crushing expectation of perfection and step into the liberating power of acceptance and growth. So when we say maturity in relationships is about growth and resilience, what we mean is this: love isn't static. It's dynamic, alive, tested, and shaped by the pressures it endures. And just like gold purified in fire, relationships that survive challenges shine brighter and stronger than those that have never been tested. And here's the closing thought. Don't measure the quality of your relationship by the absence of problems. Measure it by the presence of resilience, by the willingness to face imperfection without running, by the courage to choose commitment even when it's hard. Because in the end, the couples who endure are not the ones who avoided the storms, but the ones who learned how to sail through them together. That is the truth of love worth building and worth keeping